You ask anyone for their pick when it comes to the most memorable and emotionally evocative soundtracks, and it's pretty much inevitable that Clannad and Afterstory will be a high-ranked reply. Certainly, a part of it is that the show itself is so emotionally affecting, and also so immensely popular. But even looking to other works known for their emotional effect, it's hard to find any where the soundtrack is so core to the show and as well recognized as it is with Clannad. For most, it's just that one critical piece at the high point of the show, but in the case of Clannad, it seems to me at least, that quite a large portion of the soundtrack manages to stick with the listener. So why is that? Why is it so memorable, and why does it work so well? What is it about Jun Maida's compositions that reduce us to a sobbing heap? Well, let's take a look at some of the key tracks from the soundtrack and see if we can gain some insight into that question. Spoilers ahead, obviously. In a video I put out about a year ago, I broke down why the iconic ED Dango kazoku is so well crafted and so well utilized. Check that out here. And while I will go beyond that, in part some of my reasoning there carries over, specifically with how the show builds this emotional link in the viewer with this piece. Musically and lyrically the piece is touching in itself, but then it builds this connection through repetition, creating this mental association with the broader narrative of the series, as well as specifically with Nagisa. Having the ED be a song related so closely to Nagisa makes perfect sense, her being the core to so much of the series, and her tragedy among the most powerful. So it works brilliantly that the piece is just a version of Nagisa's theme with vocals. Dango kazoku is the obvious one though. Let's look a bit further, starting with Town, Flow of Time, People. This is our very first musical introduction to the world of Clannad, beginning at the first second of the first episode, and it's got a lot of baggage to it even in just that brief introduction. It's linked with Tomoya's feelings of apathy, being trapped in this unavoidable cycle while hating everything around him. And in the show's opening sequence, you hear that piece fade when he sees Nagisa, her theme now entering as the visuals mirror this with the monochrome colors opening up into the whole spectrum. The piece aptly captures the mood its title implies, the sensation of watching the world pass you by. It begins with a pickup note in a chorus synth, followed by a 3-layer texture. At the bottom is also a chorus synth, here filling out the harmony and providing some bass, with the higher chorus synth carrying our first melodic idea, even if it is fairly simple. Added to this is an electronic sound with heavy delay on, that is continuously panned from the left ear to the right ear. This introduction alone already has filled out the soundscape pretty heavily, with the panning and choral effect, creating that feeling of a world around us. And the piece will use the rich, established soundscape to build more distinct melodies atop it, which is why it makes perfect sense that the initial melody isn't too complex. This is followed up with the introduction of some percussion in bongos and shaker, and a staccato melody in the upper strings, which is answered with a more lyrical legato theme in the lower strings. When the upper strings return, we now have the addition of shamisen, and then at the next repeat, piano, which then takes a more soloistic moment with the violin theme fading away, before we return to the previous character where it was at its most layered. The structure of the piece works really well. It has a lot of distinct and compelling melodic content, but uses repetition to build a gradually more and more intricate texture, establishing something as if it were a strong melody, but then, rather than develop it, repeat it and create a new melody on top, and continue doing so until the desired effect is reached. Maeda also effectively avoids monotony, even as he keeps his character of time passing by having brief soloistic breaks where one particular instrument can come to the forefront and be more expressive. It really captures the broadness of the world flowing around you, that everything fits neatly together even as little bits here and there stand out more clearly at points. It creates a sensation of staying stationary and in motion simultaneously. Roaring Tides is one of the most iconic pieces from the soundtrack, often used in scenes that are extremely dramatic, tragic, and a bit bittersweet, with almost a sense of the deterministic to its final notes when used in tandem with the scene's conclusion. We can actually draw a lot of parallels to the previous piece in this. There's again a heavy use of repetition to gradually build. The piece starts with a pickup into a 3-voice texture, here with wind chimes, piano melody, and an accompaniment figure in the piano's left hand. There is one big difference though. And that is that rather than having several breaks in a primarily monotonous character, it has two main sections to it. One more at ease, which transitions to an especially dramatic character about 2/3 of the way in, with the introduction of a melody in the violins and a change in the repeated pattern the piano plays. The contrast between these two sections really sells it. The gradual subtle development leading way to a sudden powerful climax, which is especially effective if you consider how this reflects the pacing of a lot of scenes in entertainment in general, preparing us emotionally for what is to come without giving away too much. What I think makes this transition really work is something pretty interesting. Let's refer to the two characters as Section 1 and Section 2. What is cool about these two sections is that the second section mirrors Section 1's very first musical statement. Let's break it down. If we take these first 4 notes in Section 1 that serve as the body of this repeated phrase as a whole, looking at the entire phrase, this 4-note pattern is repeated 3 times, and the other parts of the phrase don't repeat within the phrase with the same rhythmic or melodic content, unlike these 4 notes. So this is essentially the smallest unit that we can condense the mental association of this entire phrase and entire first section down into. The second section is even more straightforward in this regard, with the entire phrase composed of continual 8th notes, and its one point of melodic repetition being a 4-note pattern that occurs 4 times. You can already see the similarities these two 4-note patterns bear just at a glance, having the alteration between stepwise motion and leaps, and in fact it is the direct reverse. Section 1 has leap, leap, stepwise, Section 2 stepwise, leap, leap. If we write out Section 1's in reverse and move it up a perfect 5th, well, we almost have the basis for Section 2 already. Just one small alteration is required, which makes sense because this piece is quite clearly in the key of A minor, so we have to turn this B into an A for it to make sense harmonically while it still maintains the same spirit. Maybe it seems like I'm going a little Frankenstein here, but I really think that this little touch is what makes the two sections function so well against one another. Maybe Maeda didn't have this in mind directly while composing it, but the way they mirror one another makes them both distinct musically on their own, while also making the transition of one to the other feel like an incredibly natural development. Let's take a look at one more piece, Snowfield. This piece is used for a variety of occasions, to evoke a sense of otherworldliness or the supernatural, tragedy, reflection on the past, and most notably it's utilized during Ushio's death, a combination of all 3. And also Ushio dies when it's snowing outside, and the song is called Snowfield. Don't think I need to make the connection there. This piece has a pretty firm harmonic base to it, mainly alternating between 1 and 5 in C minor. It definitely seems to have the intention of creating a sense of place. The synth that establishes the harmony pans from ear to ear, while a repeated melodic idea faints in and out of the distance, panned primarily towards the center right, but alternated with a pickup figure that is more to the left. The auditory effect of the broad round synth used, while the percussion bells with heavy delay carry this repeated figure with growing and fading dynamics, creates a similar effect to that of the first piece I covered, Town, Flow of Time, People. And I think this could very well be intentional. Where Town, Flow of Time, People shows a sense of apathy to the world passing by around us, Snowfield shows the inevitable sorrow of the world even as everything continues turning, as the snow continues to fall. The melody in the strings expresses this great sorrow as it enters again and again, but leaves each time without a feeling of true resolution, this endless repeated harmonic motion, each time leaving pause for moments of pseudo-silence, where the pre-established figures continue playing, creating a kind of distinction between the voice that speaks within the setting the music establishes, utterly perfect for its usage during Ushio's death. Clannad's OST is really well crafted musically, with strong melodies and fantastic mixing, impeccably matched to the show it accompanies, brought to an even higher level by a clever stylistic interconnectedness that brings everything together. That every moment and track carries with it so much emotional baggage, and how each track can completely transport you away to another place. Hopefully this analysis gave you a little glimpse of why it's so effective. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. A special thank you goes to my patron Talon. And if you'd like to support me as I chug along in this month of videos, you can do so at patreon.com/KOMOVIJ. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.